Welcome to the podcast. This is session number 18 of our Through Theology in a Year of Theology Unplugged broadcast. Great to have you. Great to have you live. Great to have you come in afterwards. We are on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. And you can find us in all these places. The confusing thing is sometimes, and I know this is confusing, I don't know how the search engines work. They probably do pick us up well. But on Spotify and all the podcast catchers, if you're just listening, we are under Theology Unplugged. Theology Unplugged. That's the podcast that's been going on since, we started this in 2005, Theology Unplugged. Isn't that crazy? We're one of the longest running theology podcasts there is. I think there's only one that has run longer than us. But we haven't been consistent, of course, and that's my fault, but we're being very consistent now. But yes, Theology Unplugged, whenever you're getting on a podcast, if you're looking for us on YouTube, that would be Credo House. That's the Credo House channel on YouTube. I need to check. I need to remember to check right after class. Search on YouTube for Theology Unplugged and see if this comes up. That would make things a whole lot easier. Or somehow I just need to do it doing business as on YouTube as Theology Unplugged. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, except for if you're searching for us, but obviously you have found us in some way. So it's great to have you. Please, if you enjoyed this, if you enjoy what we're doing, the most important thing you can do is like and comment. People are telling me this. I got a message yesterday. Make sure you tell everybody to like and comment, because that's how it gets going. I try to tell everybody, but I guess can't tell everybody enough. Like and comment if you do like this, or if you do have something to comment, just let us know you're watching. I'd love for you to reach out in any of the avenues. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcast or one of the other podcast catchers, give us a review. That's very helpful there. But anyway, so let's get started. We're talking about, we're still on the theological process. And what we are doing with this is we are walking through this chart. And as I told you, we are going to walk through this chart in many different ways. It's just so important. It really is. I can't convince you enough of how important this chart is to get your brain thinking in such a way. Because we spend, as Christians, the majority of our time in the Bible, one way or another. You may be doing deep study. You may be trying to formulate your systematic theology, as we are now. You may just be interpreting or reading a devotional, as I do with Through the Bible in a Year every single year. It's just kind of a basic devotional. I'm not doing deep study. I just want a big overview. But at the same time, I have to have my brain thinking in such a way that the Bible, the most important source of our theology, which makes it the most important resource that we go to for life. It really is. When we talk about the Scripture, it is, whenever you handle it, it should say handle with care. Be careful, not because it's holy, not because it has some type of aura about it, not because it has a power in and of itself, but because the words written in, what you believe about them, that they are the words of God, they can affect people in so many different ways and structure your entire theology one way or another. And as I showed 2 times ago on Friday, how we can short-circuit this process and automatically think that since the Bible is the Word of God, it automatically applies to us. It has some magical power, some magical aura. That's not true. It's just not true. Listen to this. If God was going to use the Bible that way, and I'm not saying you haven't had your instance where you did open up the Bible and it did directly apply to you. I think there are times that I've seen and I've heard that God blesses us in spite of our methodology rather than because of our methodology, but he's not blessing the methodology. But that would be very rare. Okay, more often than not, it can mislead you to where you take the Bible and you use it as this magic book approach. You don't do this systematic theology. You don't pull in all the different resources we're going to be talking about during this entire this entire first part of Through Theology in a Year, called Prolegomena, the prologue to theology, the first little chapter of the book of theology that comes beforehand that we've got to read. But if God was going to use it that way, if it was going to be this magic book approach where the context didn't matter, the history didn't matter, what was going on at the time didn't matter, it was just inspired, and kind of God overrode the original intent, and now he has an intent just for you. So you have this reader response hermeneutic saying, God, speak to me today about my marriage. Speak to me today about whether or not I should take this job. And you open up the Bible and you look, that's magic book stuff. It's not good. If he was going to do that, you don't need a Bible. I mean, just have the AI now just say, give me a random sentence. It'd be the same. I mean, if God's gonna take things out of context and use it in such a way, just use that. Use the billboard whenever you're driving down the street. You see, it doesn't work that way. I mean, maybe we would want it to. I don't know. I kind of like knowing what's going on, knowing the context, knowing the big picture. But if he was going to do that, he doesn't need a Bible to do that. He can do it any way, with any words, on any page, on any billboard, on any TV, wherever he wants to do it. So this is we have to take the Bible through its proper process of understanding, and that's what we're doing here. Okay, so let's get back to this. This is what we've been looking at, this chart, where you start in the bottom left and say, what did it mean then? Then you go to the top and you say, what does it mean? And then you go to the bottom and say, how does it apply to us? That 3-step process is the process we have to take it through. And then once we begin, it's kind of like this, and I said this last time, I think this is great, the way to look at it, but you have a guy here on the bottom left, the ancient guy that looks like he's straight out of the Bible, and then the guy on the top who looks like he's been stripped bare of any cultural context. You don't know where he's from. It's just plain Jane guy. And then the guy on the bottom right who is now dressed up for today. He's got a suit on. He looks like he's from today. He got a suitcase. So you've got this 3-step process, and we're taking it, and we're going from clothed to unclothed to clothed as we find the principle, as we go back and we say, what is the big picture principle that we are trying to find if the Bible teaches such? And so we have to take it through this process. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start taking it through this process. And as I said before, we'll probably spend another 3 or 4 weeks on this, because I want to keep on giving example after example after example, because that's the way to drill it into your head. I don't do this just to spend time, just to have a side subject that I'm teaching on here. I do it because it's that important. As we move forward, as we go through this entire year of theology, and you ask the question, well, what's this theology thing about you're listening to? And the people say, what method does it use whenever it's going through theology? How do you, what is the process that he takes you through? How does he know this is true? How does he know this is what should be taught? That kind of stuff. You at least have a process. You say, here's the process that he goes through. And then you can agree with the process, or you may not agree with the process. You may not end up saying this process is correct. You may look at this process and say, no, that doesn't work. I don't like it. Well, let's talk about it. Let's figure out why it doesn't work. This is assuming a particular, it's called a hermeneutic. A hermeneutic. This is assuming a certain hermeneutic. A hermeneutic is the method that you use in interpreting something. There's lots of different hermeneutics. And yes, right now I'm just presenting one. It is sometimes called the historical grammatico. Sometimes it's called the I just like authorial intent hermeneutics, because that says it all. We're getting to what the author originally intended so that we can extract the timeless principles and apply it to today. So this is what it's called, but there are other ones. There are allegorical hermeneutic. That's more but the problem is every other hermeneutic you present to me, you say, Michael, I don't want to use this method. I don't like it. Well, what's your alternative? Tell me. And I'm telling you, every other alternative you present is simply magic book stuff. That's all it comes down to. I don't know of any other hermeneutical method to take anything through. The Bible, the Constitution, a text you get from somebody. This is the natural way in which we do it. And God he's a very natural God in a way. I mean, yes, supernatural, but at the same time, he created this world. He created this earth. He created how we do things, how the human mind works, how we interpret each other. In the garden, he had an original intent. And let me tell you something, we're sticking to that original intent. This is the way that he has created us. And he said, you know what he said about it? He said it is very good. That's that, and it'll be that way for all eternity. I sincerely believe that throughout all eternity, once we get to the new earth and begin to do everything we're going to do there, where we don't have sin, I guarantee we will still be using this method. Seriously. Why? Because it's the one God created. We mess it up because of our lives and trying to apply the Bible directly to us, having a bent in our mind that pulls us to the situation as we want it, our desire to see things according to our desire, to have theology according to our desire. But this is the way that God originally intended it. So we're doing it. Well, like I said, we'll be doing it for all eternity. You say, Michael, what do you mean we'll be doing this for all eternity? Yeah, we will be doing theology for all eternity. I guarantee it. I just hope that whenever I get there, I have taught theology well enough that I can keep on teaching theology, because that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. I'm gonna fill out my application right whenever I get there and keep on doing this. And what I'm saying by that is this: we will forever be learning. God is infinite. We are finite. We have got a gap of knowledge base that is eternity, that is infinite, unstopping between God's understanding of the world and our understanding of the world, and we could never, ever get to God. We would never get to understand things the way he does, because he is God and we are not. But let me tell you something. We will be learning all our lives. We will be putting together our systematic, and this is very controversial. I didn't mean to start saying this, but I think we will have in heaven disagreements. Not sharp disagreements where, we separate from each other and we don't like each other, but disagreements, because that's the way God created. Disagreements are not sin. What is sin is the way we think about those disagreements and what they do to our relationships. But disagreements themselves are not sin, so I don't see any reason why in eternity these disagreements will cease. They're good because they sharpen us, they push us. There's not going to be a book that's given to us in heaven that says, okay, here is the book. Read it from beginning to end. It has all the right answers to everything. That's not the way God created us. He created us in his image, and one thing he wants us to do is strive and learn and accomplish on our own. And so we'll be doing this. I predict this method will still be the method we are using in heaven, or something like it, maybe a refined, much better method. So there's my little side sermon that gives you something really to think about. And it is, it's a big chunk to take off and think about. And, that's what I believe, and why I'm so excited about this, why I do this. This is not a temporal thing. This learning is not temporal. It is not something that we say, oh, well, we'll know everything once we get to heaven, so why bother with this stuff? We'll all know the same amount. We'll all know how to do things. We'll all have the same personalities. We'll all have the same bents, the same passion. That is completely wrong. I don't see that at all. You would have to give me a reason to believe that. I'll give you a reason to believe this. This is because this is the way God created it, and it is very good. Unless you can tell me, unless you can show me why it is that disagreements have to be sin, Not that disagreements are sin, but disagreements have to be sin, rather than the very good that God created. It's kind of like saying in heaven, God, I didn't mean to get into this, but it's kind of like saying in heaven, will we all be able to slam a basketball? That was my dream. I never got there. I could get my hand, this far above, but my hand is so small. Look how small my hands are. I could not palm a ball, so I could not do it. I couldn't slam it with two hands. I thought by the time I was 30, 35 years old, I would be able to do it because I kept on trying. I didn't try that hard, obviously, but I never was able to. But that's one of my reoccurring dreams, is that I get to heaven and I can slam a basketball. Now, does that mean I will be able to whenever I get to heaven? Absolutely not. I mean, we'll probably play a game, and you'll beat me. I mean, it's going to be tough. In the current condition I'm in right now, it won't be that tough. But I'm going to get in shape in heaven, get going. But whenever we get to the new earth, we'll play basketball, and somebody will lose. Somebody will lose, but they won't think badly about it, and somebody else won't think pridely about it. Why will somebody lose? Because somebody's going to be better than you. They're going to be more practiced. That's what they're going to do. That's going to be their passions more. That's the way I believe that when we get to eternity, it will continue to function. All you're doing in eternity is extracting the sin and the pain and the tears and the death. All of that will be gone, but everything else will continue very much, and we'll be so surprised about how great it is. So all of that to say, here's the methodology we're using. We're going to continue to use this methodology. Now let's go to the examples. And I promise from now on, once we're doing this, I'm going straight to the examples and I'm moving through them. Tomorrow we'll start with the 10 Commandments. Okay, so let's start here and let's go to my first example. And I had planned on this being a short example because it's a good one. Greet each other with a holy kiss that we talked about last time, how that is extracted into being kind and accepting of one another, and then it gets put back into our culture as a handshake or a fist bump or a bro hug, that kind of thing. It expresses the same thing, expresses the same principle. Now, here's one I use this one not because I've got the answer for it, but I think I do. I think I understand it. But because it's a good one that shows a lot of confusion. Shows right here what it looks to be dressed up in the author's day. What is this passage dressed up like in the author's day? And it has got a weird dress that we don't understand. It's got a weird way of doing hair. We don't, literally, but it's got a weird shoes we don't understand. It's like that all the stuff, all the baggage that is tied to this, it's hard for us to understand. Therefore, it is hard for us to extract what it is the timeless principle, only if there is a timeless principle. There is not always a timeless principle, but in this one, let's see here. It's a passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I'm not going to go through the whole passage because I'm just going to express the clothing type thing. How that really works out. The clothing thing that we're trying to undress. No, that doesn't work out too good. Okay. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 5 says, "But every woman who has her head uncovered while praying or prophesying disgraces her head. For she is one and the same as the woman whose head is shaved." Boom. Whoa. That is crazy. We have to really, you look at that and you say, I don't have a clue what that means here in Oklahoma, America. I don't know what that means wherever you're at. You probably don't. If you lived in the Middle East, this wouldn't be a great hurdle to get across. There wouldn't be a great chasm that we have to build a cultural bridge across. But that is for Westerners. We don't know what this means. It's confusing to us, so we have to get into the culture. We have to research and try to figure out what is going on, because we do not know what it means for a woman to have her head uncovered while praying. What does that mean? And why does it disgrace her head? And how is she the one and the same with a person whose head is shaved, who we don't even know what that is? But here's what we do, right? We begin to do our research. We go back to these books. all of these books back here, you research the internet, you watch YouTube, or you go to the books. I prefer you go to the books because they're a little bit more established, but there's lots of good podcasts, lots of good things you can go to help understand this. But what does it mean? Well, from the culture of the day, here's what we can say. Now, there's even more controversy about this lately, but I'm not going to bring up that controversy, but it's incredibly interesting. It really is. One of these days, I'll do a podcast on just this passage and what some of the proposals are for it, and you'll really, really be able to see how weird the clothing is that this passage may be wearing that we have to take off. Again, probably not the best illustration. But, okay, so what does it mean for a woman to have her head uncovered? Now, the best we can say right now is this. Whenever a woman has her head uncovered, it is basically you have a covering over your head, and you can relate this because a lot of you all know what it's like, or you have kind of thought through some of the stuff that they do go through in the Middle East, and how a woman is always covered all up. Just her eyes are seen, and her whole body from head to toe is covered. Now that expresses a couple of things. Number one, whenever a woman takes her hair and shows other people, shows other men, what happens is that is a provocative move. It is something that, like today, it's like a provocation from a woman who is showing herself too much. So we can do that in our day in different ways. But in this day, whenever somebody had their head uncovered, what it was, and this is just the best we got. I mean, I know that this is the case, but whenever a woman has her head uncovered, it is a provocative thing. Now, while she does this, she disgraces her head, for she is one and the same as the one whose head is shaved. Well, what does that mean? Well, I think this makes sense. I mean, the women in that day, again, as you go through the background commentaries, as you go through and understand culture of the day, women who had their heads shaved were temple prostitutes. They were the ones who hung out at the temples of other gods and prostituted themselves. The world's oldest occupation, as some people have said. This has been going on. And in this day, they shaved their heads. You may have thought, well, that's not very great, but there's reasons for that. There's a lot of reasons for that. Whenever you being a prostitute, you would shave your head. And I think it sounds counterintuitive to what I'm talking about here, but it's actually not. It actually fits right in with a woman having her head shaved. But in this day, whenever a woman came to church, let's say you're living in this day, and just trust me on this right now. I am saying at first that I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. But just trust me so that you can see what this looks like. A woman comes to church. She has become a Christian. And her and all her buddies have become Christian, all the other women. And they come to church after sitting and talking with their friends about Christianity. And they say, wow, can you believe this? Jesus has accepted women just like he has accepted men. And there's no difference between God's love for a man and for a woman. This was something that was very freeing of the day. They weren't second-class citizens anymore. That's how they were thinking. Of course, this is true. Of course, Christianity shows that we are all what we would call ontological equals, in the sense that in our essence, who we are all equal with each other. And so this was a very liberating and freeing thing for women of the day. Wow, can you believe this? We have been freed. We are on the same level as the men as far as God's love for us. So let's show our liberation. Let's go to church, and while we're conducting services, let's take our head covering off. Let's show everybody our hair. That's what was going on. So they were showing everybody their hair, therefore giving a provocation, a sexual provocation. And Paul was saying, hey, don't do that, because if you do that, you're just like a prostitute. So basically, Paul is saying it's still expressing the same thing. You still need to have respect. And here's why. Because if you are a woman and you have your head covered and you are with your husband, then what you are basically doing is saying, there are parts of me I only show my husband. And that's what it expresses in that day. And so whenever they would uncover it, one thing they would also be doing besides sexual provocation is disrespecting her husband, and basically saying there is no, while I am equal in my essence, I think what God is saying is that we are equal in every single way. I know this is controversial, but just hang with me and just assume that I'm right. They were basically liberating themselves from the headship of their husband as well. So there was two things: sexual provocation and liberation from the headship of her husband. And they were saying, we don't need this anymore. And Paul comes in and says, whoa. You still need it. I'm not saying you're not ontologically equal, but what you're expressing here in this culture today is not good. And it doesn't accurately represent what the Christian family is like. Paul said that the man is the head of the wife, and the wife needs to remain in submission to her husband. Again, if I'm right, then what we have here is you have a twofold situation. Them liberating themselves from their husband, and second, giving sexual provocation. So what does this look like then? If we go back to the PowerPoint and we say, like I said, this may not be the best illustration. I didn't think this thing through very well, but I mean, I've already got myself deep into it. So you've got the culture of that day that clothes these principles in some way, and that is with the head covering and with the submission to their husband, or the liberation from their husband. And then whenever you unclothe it, what you have is the basic principles. And what I mean by this, of course, is what are the basic principles, if anything, is being taught? Well, I think something's being taught here. I think it still has meaning. Even though today we have no clue about head coverings, it's not a sexual provocation, or much of one at least, for a woman to wear her hair down, long flowing hair. That's not it. But at the same time, it still is, especially in a lot of traditional Christian churches, and I myself hold to this view, but we'll get to that later on, and I'll give you a defense of all sides. But I believe that there is a hierarchy within the family, and that women are to submit to the husband's godly leadership. And so a principle is pulled out, and one thing it says basically is this: hey guys, listen, number one, don't be sexually provocative in public situations. And number two, continue to express and show your respect for your husband and your submission to him. Those are the timeless principles. So if I'm correct and those are the timeless principles, that's what it is unclothed. Clothed, it is head covering. It is making sure that your hair is not shown and not looking like one whose head is shaved. Unclothed, it looks like this. God says, do not be sexually provocative in public situations, and continue to submit to your husband. I think both those are one and the same, really, of course, as I presented it. Now we say, okay, how does this look today? When we clothe it? When we go to the third step? If we're correct that there is a timeless principle, we have extracted it, now we have to clothe it again, very literally, for today. What does that look like? Well, like I said, today, the hair being uncovered is not a sign of sexual provocation, nor is it a sign of submission to your husband, at least in the West. And somebody may ask, well, should we clothe it back up that way? No, that's the problem. We are not supposed to do that. Christ taught us to look at the Bible and look for the deeper principles, especially whenever he's talking about the commandments and how people don't really understand what it means to murder. It's the same thing as hating somebody. So the principle is much bigger than just the expression of murder. Well, in this, it's the same way. And so we clothe it back up, and you say, how do we clothe it back up then and express that principle? I would say there's a lot of ways. I mean, you could say women are not to dress provocatively. We know what that looks like, whether it's their tops or their skirts or something like that, and act provocatively. I mean, it goes across the board. It's just basically this. The principle is no sexual provocation. And then you clothe it, and there's very definite ways we clothe that today. Don't wear your tops down too low. Don't have your skirts up too high, whatever, right? That's number one. Number two, women, continue to submit yourself to your husband and show that sign of submission. Now, I don't think the sign of submission is the most important thing, but if there is a sign of submission, just like there was in that day, they kept their heads covered, showing their submission to their husband. Today, we do have ways to express that, and one of those ways is maybe a wedding ring. Maybe today you might get liberated and say, hey, I don't care about, showing my respect to my husband, that I am committed to him. I'm going to get rid of the wedding rings. So there's ways in which our culture clothes this back up, and it does have application of identical principle proportion, just not identical cultural expression proportion. So that is taken 1 Corinthians passage. There's a longer passage about this, but in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, we didn't go into it deep in detail, but I'm just using that as a base example because it's easy to use, and it makes at least basic sense, even if people do not agree with my interpretation of it. I think it's hard to disagree with it, but you'd have to take another kind of this weird approach, but like I said, I'm not talking about that right now. But anyway, so I hope this has been beneficial for you. I hope that we have made progress in our understanding. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to start with the 10 Commandments, maybe go through first 3 or 4, maybe the first 4, the first grouping of them. That would probably be good, but we'll see. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you once again for, if you like it, liking the show. If you commenting. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. I would love to hear from you in a comment on Apple Podcasts. Whatever way you can do it, that would be wonderful. Also, another thing is I want you to go to credoministries.org. Credoministries.org is the umbrella website ministry that shows basically everything we're doing and shows how to get to different places. We are in the process of updating this, but that's where it's at right now. And then you go to here. This is my Patreon, and this is how I get supported. If you like what I'm doing and you want extra stuff too, lots of extra stuff, please become a patron of any level. $3 or $100 a month. I need this in order to survive. This is the primary way I make my living right now. So please consider becoming a patron if you believe in what I'm doing. And please, again, subscribe and click that bell that shows when I'm coming live every day so you can be reminded, and comment. So thank you all once again for showing up, and I'll see you tomorrow.